This colonel is a real warrior type guy, and he had a degree in plasma physics. And he was also a consultant to NASA, and he was a consultant to people out at the Palos Verdes nuclear power generating station just 50 miles west of Phoenix. And there were a couple of things that he mentioned. I went up directly to him to ask whether he had ever worked in underground facilities, and I asked him this cold, and he just looked up at me and said, "Which one?" I said, "I don't know, you tell me." And he said, "Well, I used to ride the Lev." I said, "Pardon me?" I said, "What did you say, a Lev? Do you mean a mag-lev?" And he said, "Yeah, mag-lev." And then he started raving about how Clinton knew nothing about this, and Clinton wasn't a military man, and he had no need to know about what was going on underground. And he said the entrance to the system that he took was into White Sands Proving Grounds. The other thing he said was there was a base on the moon. I find that quite astounding. I mean, I have heard astounding things, not only from this colonel, okay, but also probably the highest rank was a retired 3-star general, lieutenant general in the Air Force. And he knew another guy that I was in contact with, and this other guy claims that he worked 7 years on the U.S. anti-gravity program. And that's a fraction of what he told me, and I've got a tape recorded. It's true. Whoa, what a sham the space program is. Because there's another space program going on, a secret space program. And that's what I was attempting to find. In fact, you don't have to go too far to find that there is some secret space programs going on, because they have their own shuttles and their own astronaut crews right out here at Vandenberg Air Force Base, unbeknownst to everybody, and they scuttled a $5 billion facility that was housed there at one time. That was back in the 80s. But the kind of space program he was talking about is using a spacecraft that can leave the bounds of our atmosphere and travel to the planet Mars at 0.8 C, 0.8 the speed of light. And I said, "How do you know that?" "I've been there," he said.
Yes, Bill, could you just elaborate a little more on the trips to Mars that you had mentioned earlier?
That this man who told me this, by the way, verified he is an aerospace engineer. I cannot verify that he's also a physicist except by his writings, and I have some of his papers. And he claimed to work shoulder to shoulder with a race of human-like beings just like us. I forgot where he said they were from, if it really matters, but it was these people who were guiding him through the... He wasn't back engineering so much as he was on trying to explain the physics of what the engineers were doing. He was investigating the physics of it with the assistance of these beings, so he claimed. And he worked in underground facilities at Nevada Test Site, Channel 8, Edwards Air Force Base, maybe other places. And when I asked him this question, or I put this question to him, he said that he had been on this craft, had gone to Mars, and I asked him, where did you go? Where did you land? And he said, "We went underground on Mars. And there was a base there where they landed." And he would not describe the base, who put it there, or whether it was our base. Nothing. He shut up about that. But in order to just evoke a little bit more information out of him, I asked the question, are there Martians? And there was a real pregnant pause before he replied, and he simply said, "Yes." And I said, "And what do they look like?" Now get this, he said, "Like the ancient Egyptians." Now there's a book out, I find this fascinating, by Graham Hancock, just recently put out, about the connection between the planet Mars and Egypt. Is somebody onto something here? I don't know, but I think that's quite a coincidence, because there were people wandering around in the 1950s here in California telling me they had met Martians. and they had olive skin, dark hair, dark complected. I don't know how many of those stories. They were never little grays, they were always human. Yet we don't see any cities on Mars, not the canals. We know the atmosphere is carbon dioxide, it's very thin. Where do they live? But we do know that Mars once had apparently abundant water on its surface and probably had conditions that could support life. So if there are people on Mars, maybe they do live underground. Who knows?
Can you tell me what else you found? Because I know that you have something, has some information in regard to non-terrestrial officers. Is that right?
Yeah. There was an Excel spreadsheet, and the title was non-terrestrial officers, and it had names, ranks. Wasn't a long list, didn't even fill out a screen, I think.
Well, could you just generally say how many? I mean, if you were to guess, are we talking 20, 50?
20. Maybe 30.
Did you notice if they were male or female by chance?
That I can't remember.
Okay. First names and last names?
Definitely ranks, but no, nothing to say, Army captain or Navy captain or...
So the designation wasn't there as far as which organization they worked for.
So, I mean, that was entitled non-terrestrial officers, and obviously not living green men, so I was thinking, what force is this? And that phrase is nowhere to be found on the web or in official Army documentation or anything. And the other thing was a list of ship-to-ship and fleet-to-fleet transfers. Bear in mind, fleet-to-fleet, so multiple ships, of materials. And these ships weren't, US Navy ships. Again, I don't remember any of the names, but I remember at the time looking and trying to match up the names, and there wasn't anything that matched.
So, now this theoretically would have been pretty top secret information if indeed non-terrestrial is what it sounds to be, which is off-world, right?
Yeah, I mean, I gleaned from that information, I surmised that an off-planet sort of space marines is being formed. And if you actually look at DARPA, Defence Advanced Research and Projects Agency literature at the moment, in the last few years, a lot of the government space command stuff, it's all about space dominance, and it really is, the final frontier. So I think, it's natural for them to want to control space and be developing a space going forward as a secret. But I think most likely using technology reverse engineered from ET.
To get out there, in other words.
Yeah, and also to be cloaked. I mean, otherwise, how many other governments would see this going on?
So, and this was, what part, I mean, was this NASA? Where was this? Are you at liberty to say?
Again, I wish I was. I find it so hard to remember all of it. It's strange, I can remember IP addresses, but lots of the names and where I was when I found particular things. I remember thinking at the time, this must be NASA and the Navy, and all, secret parts thereof. So it was either the Navy or NASA I was in most likely. I think it was most likely the Navy, but I'm not entirely sure.
Okay. So at this point, this kind of a discovery is really stupendous, right? I mean, for any researcher to come across something like that is pretty intense.
If what I surmised to be correct was correct, and it does kind of point that way.
This colonel is a real warrior type guy, and he had a degree in plasma physics. And he was also a consultant to NASA, and he was a consultant to people out at the Palos Verdes nuclear power generating station just 50 miles west of Phoenix. And there were a couple of things that he mentioned. I went up directly to him to ask whether he had ever worked in underground facilities, and I asked him this cold, and he just looked up at me and said, "Which one?" I said, "I don't know, you tell me." And he said, "Well, I used to ride the Lev." I said, "Pardon me?" I said, "What did you say, a Lev? Do you mean a mag-lev?" And he said, "Yeah, mag-lev." And then he started raving about how Clinton knew nothing about this, and Clinton wasn't a military man, and he had no need to know about what was going on underground. And he said the entrance to the system that he took was into White Sands Proving Grounds. The other thing he said was there was a base on the moon. I find that quite astounding.